Hello Word Nerds! Happy Thursday! We are fast approaching National Novel Writing Month and I am getting really pumped for it. The stars have all aligned for me this year. I have an idea that I'm very excited about. I happen to have finished up revisions on my other book a while back and it is still out with beta readers, so I don't have to worry about that. Overall, I'm just super excited to be participating in NaNoWriMo, and I have a lot of things prepared for this new idea. I have the main characters. I have a ton of scene ideas that I've been writing down as they come to me, but I haven't really put it all into a cohesive plot yet. And I thought it would be really fun to kind of have you guys along with me as I finished up the plotting of this book. I've got kind of a couple things going on right now. I've got my Pinterest board pulled up, which I have been carefully curating for weeks now. I've also got a Google spreadsheet that I've been organizing things on. Right now it's just my characters' names and then just a bunch of notes on the world and the random plot snippets that I've had. Hopefully that will get organized during this video. And my last couple of must-haves for plotting this book today are going to be my coffee and my massive whiteboard. Can't even fit the whole thing in frame while holding coffee. Is that it? Probably not. It's big, because while I love my Google spreadsheet like it is my child, I don't feel like I have as much freedom to explore new plot ideas in it. It just feels a little bit more permanent, a little bit more structured than I'm looking for. Right now I have a lot of character ideas and a lot of world ideas and an inciting incident for the plot. I also have a very light midpoint idea where my characters have an important realization regarding everything that is going on. Basically, they realize what is causing the inciting incident, but I personally don't quite know all of the nuances around what's causing the inciting incident yet. So that's probably gotta be the first thing I figure out. Sorry, it's gotta be a little bit vague because I would, all things going well, like to publish this book one day. So I'll give you as many details as I possibly can without it being spoilery. And yeah, I'm gonna dive right in and I'll probably talk you through as I'm doing everything, give you updates, all of that. For my plotting process, I'm gonna be combining a couple different methods that I'll talk about as I'm working through it. But for right now, the two big things I'm trying to figure out just for starters are the details of the midpoint and what the ending of the book is going to be. So let's dive in. Okay, so I've got my board set up now. As you can, where am I? So I'm doing a bit of a combo of 3-act structure combined with James Scott Bell's writing from the middle idea. He has a book called Writing Your Novel from the Middle or something like that. I'll put a link to it in the description, where he talks about the mirror moment. He had heard about, the midpoint of your novel being a very important moment for your characters. And so what he ended up doing was looking at a ton of important movies and novels, fast forwarding or turning the page to the exact midpoint of the story and seeing what was happening. And he found just about unanimously at the exact midpoint, it was the character being forced to look at themselves almost as if in a mirror and really figuring out, oh, so this is what I've been wanting and this is the reality of what's happening. So I've given myself a nice big midpoint chunk in the middle of Act 2, which I know Acts 1 and 3 are actually supposed to be smaller than Act 2, but just for the sake of keeping things neat in my head, I like to have them just all be the same size because I tend to flesh out my Act 2s a little bit less anyway. I care more about knowing that midpoint and then just some bullet points of what might get me there rather than actually having all the scenes mapped out. I've tried chapter by chapter outlines before and they tend to just make me feel like I'm boxed in. And then I'm not very good at saying, oh, well, I know I have this outline, but it feels like the book is going a different direction, so I'm going to do that instead. I tend to feel very oh, I have this outline and I cannot deviate because I put so much work into this outline. So yeah, that's what's going on right now. I already know kind of the emotional feeling of what I want to have happen at the midpoint. I want my main characters to realize that they have caused the inciting incident much more than they may have anticipated. So I'm gonna get started writing all that in and see what happens. Okay, so I've started blurring the board now because it's getting real spoilery, but what I just did was I just figured out all of the components of the inciting incident. I knew I wanted the beginning to start with a scene where a character says, "The beginning is near, can't you feel it?" And so I dissected that with my 3 main characters and figured out what that beginning is for each of them. It doesn't necessarily need to be happening all at the same time, and I know I'm not going to reveal all these things even like back to back. Like, I'm gonna hold off on what some of them did until a little later in the book, but I need to know at this point. I need to know what they've all done so that I can figure out how to fix it later. So I looked at my 3 characters, looked at either what they really wanted or what they really feared to have it kind of inform what they were doing. I knew I wanted the oldest sibling to do something well-intentioned to try and help the middle sibling, even though the oldest didn't really understand everything that the middle sibling was going through. The thing that the oldest sibling wants is clashing with the thing that the middle sibling fears. I don't know if that makes any sense. It probably doesn't, but it makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm feeling pretty good moving into this midpoint now that I know what they've done. That pretty much tells me all I need to know for that mirror moment when they all come together and look at each other and themselves and see the truth. So now the biggest thing I have to figure out is how they can actually fix their problems, which will end up being the climax of the book. When it comes to endings of books, I'm a big fan of coming up with lots of possible endings and then using the earlier ideas as kind of the logical things that my characters would try to do. Your mileage may vary, but typically for me, the first thing I think of is not gonna be the ending that packs the most punch. It's gonna be the most logical thing to try. So like, what would my characters try to do first before they have to do all these other things that are going to be much, much harder and require a lot more sacrifice from them? Because by the end, I want to take these characters who have very different wants, and I hope that each of them will have at least 2 things that they want by the climax of the book, and I want them each to have to choose one of those things that they are going to get and then have to sacrifice the other to get the one thing. That is a thing that fellow word nerd Kelly talked about in a live chat once, and really stuck with me. I have it like written on a little post-it note on my computer. Give your character 2 wants, make them sacrifice one to get the other. I think it leads to very powerful endings in books. All of my favorite books require their characters to sacrifice something that they really, really want for something that they either want more or they know will be better for them or better for the group as a whole. So now that I've got the inciting incident all worked out, I know all of the components that have led to this thing happening, I can try and figure out what they're gonna want by the end and how they're going to have to hurt themselves and each other to get it. Okay, so it's been about 20 more minutes and I've come up with about 8 possible endings / sacrifices that could be made to resolve the conflict. I have one in particular that I am very interested in and I would really like to explore, that I think would play very well on like the different things that the main characters want and fear. But I do kind of want to let it sit for a little bit, maybe think about it a little bit more and come back in just a little bit, which works out pretty well because I have my writing group in 2 minutes. So I'm gonna jump over, do that, take some time to really think about my plot and what I want to have happen from there. So after my writing group, I'm gonna come back, see if I still like that idea, see if there's any way I can combine those other ideas with this one big one that I really like for an ending that packs even more of a punch, something that will hurt these sweet, precious characters much more than I actually want to hurt them, but I'm gonna do it because book. And the more time that I give myself to think about this, I'm sure the ideas will kind of spiral out from the center of that for ways that I can lead them to this point. So yeah, just gonna give myself a minute. Lighting change and outfit change, I guess. So I ended up talking with my writing group about what was going on with my book and the ending that I was thinking about doing. By the time I talked to them, I was kind of waffling between 2 of the 8 possible endings that I had come up with. And so I wanted to get their opinions on it. And with all of that having happened, I have decided what the ending is going to be. And so I was thinking about it a little bit more, decided to just take a little bit more time. So I went to my dance class and have come back, and it is now later in the evening, and I am definitely ready to finish up my plotting for pre-National Novel Writing Month. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not personally a big fan of outlining every little thing that's going to happen because I don't do well with that kind of constriction. That being said, now that I know what the midpoint is and what the ending is going to be, like what I'm actually going to be working towards, I would like to come up with some of the major beats in 3-act structure. So I already have my inciting incident, but I would like to figure out what my major plot points are going to be. And these are just kind of mini moments throughout the course of the book where something changes for the main characters. Something big happens and they have to kind of course correct. In 3-act structure, there are typically 2 major plot points, one at the end of Act 1 and one at the end of Act 2. And these can be big plot twists for your characters, or it could just be like your character realizes something that they didn't know before that might have been obvious to the reader. Regardless of what it is, something is now happening that is going to make your character have to change their goals and their life path, basically. I've got a little bit of plot point 1 figured out. Plot point 2 is going to be a little bit more difficult. I feel like plot point 1 is really like, okay, your character is in the plot now and there's no going back, like they are starting the plot. But plot point 2 is kind of like, okay, this is the end game. You have now started moving towards the climax of the book. It's informed a lot more by the midpoint that I have already come up with. And for me, when I do these things, usually plot point number 2 is very shortly followed up by like the dark night of the soul for the characters. So, you know, if people are gonna be disagreeing or fighting who normally do not fight, that is the place to make them fall apart. It's one of my favorite things to write, but one of my least favorite things to plan. So I guess I gotta plan it. So those things actually came together surprisingly easily. Knowing the ending and having already thought pretty extensively about like what I wanted the emotional beats of the story to be, it made the major plot points seem pretty obvious. And at this point, this is all I feel like I really need to have to get started writing. I will eventually take what I've written here and transfer over anything that is not currently in my Google spreadsheet. But the last thing I want to do while I have my whiteboard is I want to put, I call them scene flashes. Basically, it's any scene that I've had in my head or that I've jotted down a quick note about. I want to take those and kind of piece them in roughly where I think they would fit. And they don't have to stay exactly there, but typically I find when I organize them, they tend to stay in the same act. And so it's just helpful for if I hit a roadblock and I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to go next or what I've got going on next, I can look at this and be like, oh, well, there's this scene that I thought about doing. What would I need to have happen so that I can get to this scene? Or can I just start writing this scene? Hopefully, as I am putting these things over, I'll get a few more big plot point ideas. Because while plot points 1 and 2 are kind of the most important ones that I wanted to have as my guideposts for the story, I do hope that there will be more twists and turns than just those. And lastly, just seeing it all laid out like that, seeing that this is going to be a story. It's not just a jumble of scenes and people and world and no plot anymore. It's going to be a thing is very motivating for me. It helps remind me that I know what I'm doing, at least a little bit. I know what a story is supposed to look like, and now it is every bit as simple and as complicated as taking this list I have on my board and turning it into a book in the month of November. I think I'm done for all the pre-nano plotting that I'm gonna do. I had maybe about 10 scenes in mind, most of which were gonna fit into Act 1 of the book. Because before I started actually seriously plotting, I didn't know what the ending was going to be, and it's kind of difficult to come up with a plot when you don't know where it's going. So as I was working those things in, I had some more ideas and just kind of jotted those down as well. There's a very real chance that over the next 2 weeks I will have even more plot ideas since I have opened this door completely now. I am 100% thinking about this book all the time now, and as I get those ideas, I will just keep adding them to my whiteboard. My plan is to just keep this thing out right next to my desk for the whole month, and probably a couple times between now and the start of November I will add all of these things into my Google spreadsheet as well, because sometimes ideas come while you're on the go and I can't bring this with me everywhere. And yeah, that is me plotting my novel for National Novel Writing Month. Let me know down in the comments if you're finished plotting, how it has gone for you. Do you plot similarly to me, or do you do it differently? Is there like a method that you like? Just let us know all the things. I know no one's experience is universal, so the more methods that we compile for people, the better, the more likely we are to find things that work for each other. Like I mentioned earlier, I have put a ton of links in the description box as to more resources on plotting. Best of luck as you prepare to write your new novel. Be sure to tune in this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for our usual live chat. I cannot wait to see you all then, and until then, stay nerdy.